In a Korean hotel, a man with a severed artery lay naked in a pool of blood. When the forensic doctor examined him, he was astonished by the killer's methods. He had never seen such professional knife skills. Every wound was carefully inflicted, avoiding vital organs. The goal was to make the victim bleed to death slowly, inflicting extreme pain. Therefore, police officer Guho suspected there must have been some kind of feud between the victim and the killer. He tried to find clues at the scene, but no matter how he reconstructed it, he couldn't figure out how the killer escaped. He hadn't seen any suspicious individuals on the security camera footage. Meanwhile, in another development, a stunningly beautiful woman appeared at a nightlife venue. Her figure and demeanor captivated everyone who saw her. One young man was drawn to her. The forensic examiner confirmed that the cuts were very forceful and the weapon was identical to the previous one, also used by a right-handed person. It was likely the same person. They concluded it was the work of an extremely skilled knife user. Through the investigation, Guho discovered that 10 years prior, both victims worked together at the same hospital. They were part of a close-knit group of 3. Both are now deceased. Therefore, the remaining victim is likely the killer's next target. However, when the police went to the old hospital to investigate, he learned that all 3 had quit their jobs at the same time. The third is now the director of a plastic surgery hospital. The fact that all 3 quit on the same day made Guho feel something was very suspicious. So he went to the hospital janitor to ask what exactly happened that day. 10 years ago, on a stormy night, the hospital admitted a beautiful young woman who had fainted. Her condition was extremely critical, so 3 doctors were summoned for emergency treatment that night. That was the group of 3 men. During the treatment, the 3 doctors, captivated by the girl's alluring figure, harbored evil intentions. They conspired to take advantage of the lingering effects of the anesthetic to sexually assault her. They shamelessly told each other not to worry, saying no one would know. She might even enjoy it. In this way, the 3 doctors lost all their medical ethics. Hearing this story, Guho froze for a few seconds. He suddenly realized that the girl from 10 years ago had returned for revenge. That day, he went to the hospital director and recounted the sordid events of 10 years ago. The director was startled, but quickly regained his composure, pretending not to understand Guho. He then deliberately changed the subject. Guho ignored him and continued to press the director, trying to expose his true nature. The other 2 were dead, so the next target was the director. Guho asked if he still wanted to cover up his crime. The director angrily chased Guho out. Guho said he was just guessing, not expecting the man to be so frightened. Could the rumors be true? Since he didn't have concrete evidence, he resorted to this tactic to probe. Unexpectedly, the director's exaggerated reaction revealed everything. This helped Guho find the crucial point. As long as he followed the director, he would definitely catch the culprit. Thus, he killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Although the director presented himself as an outstanding figure, behind the scenes he was a depraved man. Guho had originally intended to follow him to find his home address. Unexpectedly, instead of going home, the director went to a nightclub to relieve his needs. But he had no idea that Guho was currently searching every room for him. The waiter, noticing Guho's furtive behavior, was about to approach and stop him when unexpectedly, the tray of drinks in his hands was knocked over by another police officer, causing it to clatter to the ground. As a result, a dagger fell out of the ice bucket. Immediately afterward, Guho saw a masked figure dressed in black from head to toe fleeing ahead. He shouted and chased after the stranger. Despite Guho identifying himself as a police officer, the man in black pushed him to the ground and quickly turned to run away. Guho desperately pursued, but just as the iron gates slowly closed, he lost sight of the suspect. He could only helplessly watch as the suspicious person escaped right before his eyes. Back at the police station, he repeatedly reviewed the security camera footage. Although the face of the man in black wasn't visible from beginning to end, his build and gait suggested it was a woman with a voluptuous figure. Combined with the knife left at the scene, he confidently surmised that she was the victim from years ago. So he immediately ordered his subordinates to search through all the anesthesia records from that rainy night 10 years ago. That night, there was only one female patient named Soo Jin. 7 years ago, she had changed her name. Now she had become a famous star with stunning beauty. Even though Soo Jin was sitting in the interrogation room, the chief had to secretly peek through the window. Guho threw the file containing the names and titles of the 2 deceased men onto the table to subtly gauge Soo Jin's reaction. She frankly said they probably knew who she was. Guho then asked if she knew Director Lee. His 2 former accomplices were dead, and he was probably dying soon too. Seeing Soo Jin remain calm, Guho brought up the events of 10 years ago. She immediately denied it, saying that she and that person had no connection whatsoever. She couldn't understand why he had told her about it. Because Soo Jin had changed her name 7 years ago, the police lacked irrefutable evidence to prove she was the real culprit. They had no choice but to release her. The investigation investigation once again reached a dead end. Guho had to pin all his hopes on investigating the whereabouts of the karambit knife. Based on its shape, size, and design, he believed it was a specialized knife used for filleting meat and bones. At that moment, a woman's image flashed through Guho's mind. Her name was Sune, the owner of the pork butcher shop at the neighborhood entrance. Her exceptional skill lay in her incredibly skillful use of a knife. Coincidentally, the knife she used was also a karambit. This detail perfectly matched the characteristics of the culprit. He immediately went to find her to verify the information, but after just a glance, he was captivated by Sune's alluring beauty. She exuded a seductive charm that left him completely disoriented and unable to focus on solving the case. He reluctantly returned home, but every time he closed his eyes, Sune's image flashed through his mind. He couldn't sleep that night. Gradually, he realized he seemed to have fallen for her, because just seeing her face made him completely forget his assigned task. It wasn't until tonight that he finally mustered the courage to put aside his romantic feelings and focus on his career. But as he peeked through the door of the butcher shop, he saw an old woman coming out. The faint scent of perfume on her felt incredibly familiar. He vaguely remembered smelling this scent somewhere before, but couldn't recall where, so he dismissed it. After all, he still had work to do. However, as soon as he stepped inside, he heard Sun-Ai's voice from the room. It seemed she was waving something that looked like a whip. As a result, he fantasized about her using a whip to take care of him. Then she would appear in an incredibly seductive form. The girl would suddenly appear right in front of him. She kept asking him if he wanted beef or pork, but he stammered, unable to say anything. In the end, he couldn't get any information out of her and only managed to take half a pig's head home. The next day, Guho passed by the butcher shop after work and saw a faint light still on inside. He began a fierce internal struggle again. Finally, he decided to leave. Suddenly, Sune appeared behind him, startling him. Seeing his furtive demeanor, she thought he was a pervert who liked to stalk people because he had been around here every day lately. He tried to explain that he was a police officer. The more he explained, the more suspicious she became. She took out her phone and called the police. This incident left Guho speechless. From then on, he was too embarrassed to go see Sun-Ai again. A hopeless romantic like him had no choice but to return to stalk the old hospital director. However, this time, instead of mentioning the case's developments, he directly warned the director to take care of his own life. "Your evil enemy is about to knock on your door," he said before leaving the hospital. That alone was enough to make the director collapse in fear. This extreme tension caused his mental state to become increasingly distorted. Even during surgery, he experienced hallucinations, mistaking the patient for the girl. This situation startled him. Seeing his distressed expression, the nurse kindly went out to get him an energy drink. Unexpectedly, the director, overcome with lust, attempted to sexually assault the anesthetized patient again. He was caught red-handed by the nurse, who had just returned. He immediately ordered her to shut up. After satisfying himself, he drove home after his shift. Little did he know he had fallen into the sights of a mysterious figure. He only saw the lights in the basement flickering on and off repeatedly, a premonition that he was about to die. The next day, Guho received news that the hospital director had been rushed to the emergency room. But there was something different from previous times. This director was incredibly resilient. He wasn't dead. Instead, he fought back, scratching the assailant's thigh. This was a golden clue for the investigation. To verify whether Sune was the culprit, Guho decided to go to the butcher shop. He said 2 lives had been lost in extremely cruel ways. The weapon used in both cases was a butcher's knife, identical to the one she had on her right. She pretended not to understand what he was saying. After he finished paying, she hurriedly cleaned up to close the shop. But just as Guho was about to leave, he noticed she was limping. Clearly, she had a problem with her leg. Unsure if it was a stab wound, he decided to feign injury at the shop. The two sat peeling apples, looking at each other hesitantly and awkwardly. Seeing his opportunity, he pinned Sune down on the table and lifted her skirt to examine her. As expected, there was indeed a bandaged wound on her thigh. Guho couldn't believe the woman he loved was the culprit. But before he could subdue her, she used her charm to obscure the harsh truth. Guho was blinded by love. He obediently fell into her trap. Coincidentally, he suddenly received an urgent call and rushed to the hospital. Just minutes before, the old hospital director had been kidnapped by a man in black. This man was identical to the one Guho had chased at the nightclub, from his clothing and height to his hairstyle. Guho was utterly distraught. It was clear he had been intimate with Sune all this time. So who was the person who had escaped? His mind was in turmoil. Had he misunderstood Sune, or were there 2 culprits? His boss angrily reprimanded them for failing to catch even a woman. Now the ambulance was gone. Because the car had no license plates and had changed vehicles to escape mid-journey, no other clues could be gathered for the time being. Guho didn't report Sune's situation to the police chief. He decided to keep it a secret until he had solid evidence. Meanwhile, elsewhere Elsewhere, the hospital director slowly regained consciousness in an abandoned factory. He was tightly bound to a cross-shaped frame. Imprisoned like a criminal, he panicked and screamed for help. Just then, an old woman and the man in black slowly approached him. He didn't know who the two people in front of him were. He saw that the other person was an old woman. The old man immediately shouted, demanding they release him. The man in black rushed forward, pulled out a karambit knife from his left eye, and severed the director's artery. Intense pain overwhelmed him, causing him to scream in agony. His screams echoed throughout the factory. He tried to feign fainting to escape, but the old woman had no intention of letting him go. She forced him to honestly admit that he felt great now. Just a few simple words instantly brought the director back to his senses. 10 years ago, he had uttered the exact same words to the poor girl. Immediately afterward, the old woman stripped off his pants, preparing to punish him severely by releasing the dog that was locked in a cage. The dog, in a frenzy, lunged and bit him repeatedly, causing him to beg for mercy. The next day, Guho received a notice ordering him to go to the factory to handle the case. Just as he was about to leave, Sune suddenly pulled his hand, holding him back and planting a kiss on his lips. Seeing her still clinging to him, he playfully returned the kiss, but he clearly misunderstood her intentions. It seemed she wanted to tell him something, but she hesitated and didn't speak. Guho and the forensic team arrived at the scene. However, there was a difference from before. Although the killer used the same weapon, this time, it was a left-handed person. Thus, the case once again reached a dead end. However, that afternoon, while Guho and his colleagues were having lunch at a restaurant, a commercial for a new film starring Sujin as a 70-year-old woman carrying out her revenge plan suddenly appeared on TV. Scenes of her acting in the film were being shown. After recalling the old woman he had met at the butcher shop, he realized that Sujin was actually that old woman. Thinking this, he immediately sped back to the butcher shop to find out what kind of relationship she had with the old woman. But the result left him stunned. Sun-A had quietly left some time ago. The shop was now just an empty building. He called, but no one answered. For a moment, he was frozen in place. If the old woman was Sun-A in disguise, then who was the mysterious figure in black? Unable to find Sun-A, Guho had to take Sujin to the police station again. But when faced with questioning, she remained incredibly calm, because she knew he had no evidence. So as long as she denied it, the police couldn't do anything. She could even use the excuse of being harassed multiple times to sue the police station in court. Finally, under pressure from his superiors, the chief ordered Guho to release her. Since then, he has locked himself in his house and refused to go out, partly because of self-doubt. The rest was because he couldn't forget Sun-A. Then one day, the news reported on a murder case, mentioning that a human trafficker had just been apprehended at his home. The manner of death was exactly the same as the three doctors. Guho immediately thought of Sun-A. Based on the address of the crime scene on TV, he quickly rushed there. Seeing the victim's neatly severed artery, he was determined to catch these two women. After days of continuous questioning, he finally learned that Sun-A was in the vicinity. She had just reopened another pork butcher shop, so he quickly drove straight there. Upon meeting her, he angrily asked if she had any conscience left. Why did she just silently disappear? She must have been very surprised that he found her, but she coldly replied that she had nothing to say. He immediately said that he had many things to say to her. After saying that, he pulled out his gun and threatened her. She immediately grabbed a knife. Now she was finally revealing her true nature. She did it because she didn't want to implicate him, but he reminded her that having chosen this path, he couldn't afford any personal feelings. She immediately threw the knife at his hand, causing his gun to fall into the fire. He was forced to fight unarmed. She pulled out the knife hidden in her thigh and lunged at him. They fought fiercely, but a woman is no match for a man. Finally, she was pinned to the floor by him, unable to resist. On one side was his responsibility to enforce the law, on the other was the woman he loved. This put him in a dilemma. The scene shifts, his face covered in blood as he coldly drives back to the station to submit his resignation to the chief. If he couldn't bring the culprit to light, then he no longer deserved this uniform. That same night, he went to Sun-A's butcher shop. He chose to follow his heart. Upon meeting her, he immediately told her he would no longer be a police officer. He had already submitted his resignation. They embraced and had a passionate night together. The next morning arrived in the blink of an eye. He woke up, reaching for his phone to check the time, but accidentally knocked it to the ground. This resulted in him knocking over a small box nearby. Inside fell out an album. It contained childhood photos of Sun-A, but when he flipped to the last page, he discovered that Sun-A and Sujin were twin sisters. At this moment, everything finally became clear. The victim from 10 years ago, raped by 3 doctors, was Sujin. Although she had grown into a famous star, she couldn't forget the painful past. Therefore, she had asked her older sister, Sun-A, to plan how to get revenge on the 3 doctors. During the operation, Sun-A was injured in the thigh, making it extremely difficult for her to move. So Sujin had to step in to complete the mission in her place. That's why the director was kidnapped, even while Sun-ae was with Gu-ho. Now that all the truth has been revealed, Gu-ho doesn't want to pursue the matter further, because he has decided to spend the rest of his life happily with Sun-ae. The cold glint of the knife in the pork shop intertwines with the lifeless eyes beneath the exquisite makeup of the actress. The butcher has used a cruel and agonizing revenge plot to draw viewers into the gray boundary between good and evil. The film ends here. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, and see you again.